Welcome to Season 4, Episode 33 of the Outlap F1 Podcast, part of the Ship It Studios Podcast Network. This is the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix race review. I am your host, James, along with my wonderful co-host, Andy. Andy, bit of a gloomy night out there. Pretty much a gloomy morning, too, if you're a Ferrari fan, or even a McLaren fan, I'd say. But how you doing, sir?
Well, the good news is we've had green flag running at Spa. It took 2 years, a hell of a long time, but we actually saw cars in anger going around that track. That was the good news. For our respective rooting interests, I think that's where the good news stopped. But anyway, I'm doing all right. The storms have passed. It looks like we're not going to have. I still have electricity, so yay to all that, and we'll get into it in just a little bit.
Hell yes. All right, so before we get into all that, I got to remind everybody you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast. Of course, you can check out our link tree and our Twitter profile page. If you are watching on YouTube, do us a solid, click like and subscribe. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or just about any podcasting app, do what you can to give us a 5-star review. That really helps us get our show out there to new listeners and watchers. You can email the show at chatnow@outlapf1.com. You can check out our website at www.outlapf1.com, where you'll find all of our old episodes, including our F1 for Beginners episode back on episode 4 of this season. Andy, tell us about how Outlap F1 Nation continues to step up.
Yes, and thank you, as always, to our monetary supporters who continue to support us throughout this long season. So thank you so much to the fine folks, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Cody Walsh, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, Mary Brown, Jonathan Scott, and of course, Matt Pulaski from the Red Sector MotoGP podcast. Thank you all very much. If you'd like to become a member of the Outlap F1 Nation, we will have a link for you in our show notes. It all goes to making the show better, making new audio, making new mixes, making it, doing a little stuff here and there creatively. That's what we're all trying to do, trying to push the show forward. So anything you want to give, we will happily accept it. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you can find that link in the show notes to help support the show as well. If you also want to support the show, you can go to Manscaped for your Manscaped grooming needs and use code OUTLAP. That's OUTLAP, all one word, for 20% off and free shipping. And of course, our buddy Vincenzo has his t-shirt line on thef1guy.com. Also, new sponsor being Athletic Greens with www.athleticgreens.com/emerging. Check them out for your nutritious and delicious goods. Also, this week, our sponsor is the Portage Park Development Project, a thriving community in the Upland Metaverse. If you are from Chicago, Portage Park might sound familiar. That's because the Upland Metaverse is based on real-world cities and properties, and Portage Park is an actual neighborhood here in Chicago. The Metaverse version of Portage Park is the most developed neighborhood in Upland, with over 700 supportive members and property owners, enjoying competitions, community initiatives, and local shops with monthly town hall meetings to connect with fellow Uplanders. And now, racing is coming to Upland. Portage Park are developing a racing team ready to fight to the top step of the podium. We have a training academy for drivers and racetracks in development, making the most of our shops and local attractions. We want to show the best part Portage Park has to offer. Come join us. Links to the Portage Park Discord server, racing track maps, and socials are in our podcast show notes. We hope to see you in the metaverse. All right. Now the housekeeping's over. Let's move in to our headlines of the day. Andy, why don't you lead us off? What do you got?
Max Verstappen, absolutely dominant the entire weekend. He showed it to you on Friday when he was a second clear of the field, and he closed the show in absolute dominant fashion. Today, he could have freaking started and Zandvoort driven over and still probably would have won the race. Unreal. It reminds me of 2014 Mercedes dominance today. Max absolutely on another level.
Thank you, Andy. For me, I'm actually going to go with an image of the day instead of a headline. And for that, Andy, I nearly lost it when Lewis Hamilton was walking down that gravel trail all alone. So distraught and downtrodden. Oh, if I could just get that printed, I would hang it in every room of my house. You'll see one right back here.
Oh, God.
I'll get working on that. But no, I mean, I couldn't agree more with your headline. I had something similar originally, but just, there's few times that I can think of in sports when I saw such a dominant performance. And that's really what Max did today, to come from was it 14th all the way to first. And everybody knew it. Like, that was the expectation going into it. He was the betting favorite. Just unreal dominance today. Hats off to Max. Something really, really crazy would have to happen for him not to win the whole thing now. So I'm just going to enjoy his reign right now for the time being. Before we start talking about the race, so let's go through our qualifying recap. And for that, I hand it off to you, Andy.
All right. Oh, I didn't charge the board. Oh, boy. Hang on one second here. We will fix this in just a second. There we go. All right. So our qualifying recap. This was how they actually qualified on Saturday, not how they lined up, because odd stat here, nobody lined up on the grid where they actually qualified. Engine penalty rules have gone a little crazy this weekend. But in P20, we had Valtteri Bottas. In P19 was Yuki Tsunoda. P18 was Kevin Magnussen. P17, Nicholas Latifi. Not advancing into Q2 was the number 5 of Sebastian Vettel. Advancing through but going no further. In P15 was Mick Schumacher. P14, Lance Stroll. P13 was Joe Granu. P12 was Pierre Gasly. P11, Daniel Ricciardo. Advancing through to Q3 and going in the top 10 shootout were Lando Norris in P10, Alex Albon in P9, George Russell in P8, P7 was Lewis Hamilton, P6 Fernando Alonso, P5 Esteban Ocon, P4 was Charles Leclerc, P3 Sergio Checo Perez, P2 was Carlos Sainz, and in P1 with a lap time of 1:43.665 was Max Verstappen.
All right, thank you, Andy, for that excellent rundown, as always. A little bit surprising, Aston Martin, not that great qualifying, but I think they really came back well on Sunday. Quite punchy, I must say, but we'll get into that here in a second. First, let's talk about the back markers, and with that, we start with the DNFs. That was Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, both of them not seeing the finish line. Then we had Nicholas Latifi in 18th, Mick Schumacher in 17th, Kevin Magnussen just ahead of him in 16th. Then we had Danny Rick in 15th, Zhou Guanyu in 14th, and Yuki Tsunoda in 13th. Andy, let's talk about Lewis first. What'd you think? Give me your instant reaction. And then, this is his first DNF. I know of 2022. It feels like it's his first DNF in like a decade.
I thought I saw a stat somewhere where in Spa, all of his DNFs have come at that same corner. This is really not a good corner. This is where he hit Nico Rosberg. This is where, obviously, he came with contact with Fernando Alonso today. So this is not like his 100-meter stretch of road. I don't think Lewis likes it very much because he was basically trying to defend his position from a very hard-charging Fernando Alonso, who basically had nothing to lose, and decided to throw it up the outside there. And Lewis came together. How Fernando's car doesn't get more damage is kind of beyond me, but Lewis's car literally goes airborne. The rear end goes into the sky's into the air, but it comes down. He was able to keep going for a little bit, but eventually, too much damage. The team told him to stop the car. He hopped out and then gave you your lovely image of walking down the road by himself with a cameraman behind him to capture all the art of that. So, yeah, the Alonso radio is actually quite fervent in the moment. He was very, very upset as to what had happened. It looked like they both came together, talked about it. I think Lewis effectively has since apologized through the media. Alonso's accepted it, and I think they're all moving on. Probably much ado about nothing, but I agree with Lewis's determination. More his fault than Alonso's going into that corner for sure.
Yeah, what a crazy image. Really kind of got you going there just a couple laps into the race there. All of a sudden, Lewis's back end is way higher than his front end. And then, he was still driving right after. And I was like, of course, Lewis Hamilton is the only driver who could do that and be able to keep racing. But yeah, eventually he did have to retire the car there. But yeah, it looked like, it was an interesting situation being Alonso, the one that kind of was in it with him. But yeah, totally Lewis's fault. I respect to Lewis for admitting to it right away. He said it was in his blind spot and it was all on him, so he took the blame for that. It didn't really affect Alonso's race. He still had a hell of a race, so I think you can't really be too mad as if you're Alonso. Alonso was my favorite driver in F1 history there for a few minutes after that quote. It had me laughing for a while, so I really enjoyed that. But yeah, so then we also had Bottas DNFing, thanks to Nicholas Latifi, who went a little wide there.
Yeah, probably the more egregious put-off there was the Latifi-Bottas incident, because Bottas gets beached, half a lap for him, and that's all she wrote. Latifi able to get it going and actually go to continue was not necessarily expected, but good enough for him. Again, I'm surprised at how well some of these cars in certain situations can take a licking and keep on ticking, because I saw that. I said, well, that's both Bottas and Latifi out, and not the case, as it turned out.
Yeah, and thankfully Latifi was able to rejoin. Otherwise, Mick Schumacher wouldn't be able to overtake anybody. He finished just ahead of Latifi there. And then Magnussen just ahead of him. You want to touch on Ricciardo at all? It seemed like he was in it during that first stint, and then that was it.
You could describe Danny's day as a slow slog back to the back. It kind of is how it felt. Every time he would kind of get into a fight it out situation, he was always, it seemed, more on the losing end. We talk about Lando. I'll talk about the McLaren cars in general and where I thought they were deficient here, which I think Daniel was also subject to it. So I don't know that it was necessarily the driver's fault here. I think just the package, the overall package, and this track and certain parts of the track, as I'll get into in a little bit, did not suit them, and it showed. And everybody else took advantage of it today.
Yeah, and then to round out the back markers, you just got Zhou Guan Yu and Yuki Tsunoda. Not too much to mention on their days, unless you got something.
Zhao was basically relatively solid for most of it, but again, no points. Yuki having to start from the pit lane. That was a late engine change call this morning, so we had one more on top of all the ones we had, just to make it all screwy. And then we also had Pierre Gasly not able to make his grid position, having to start again from the pit lane. I saw an article that said something where he was like 30 seconds away from not making the start of the race. But I guess he's pretty glad that he did, because as we'll talk about, he scored points.
Yeah. Yeah, you use the word solid to reference Zhou's day, and I think that's a good way to reference his whole season. For a rookie season, can't ask too much more to him, and he just kind of continued that. No points today, but he started pretty far back. I think he was, 18th after the penalties he had. So, all right, so let's move into the midfield real quick. For that, we start off with Lando Norris in 12th, then Lance Stroll in 11th. And then with the points finishers, we start with Alex Albon in the Williams. Impressive day to finish in 10th. Pierre Gasly in 9th. Sebastian Vettel all the way up to 8th. Esteban Ocon in 7th. Charles Leclerc in 6th after a penalty, which put Fernando Alonso in 5th. George Russell ends the day in 4th, just outside the podium, but inside the top 5, which is pretty much all he does. And then Carlos Sainz, we'll wait for the podium. I got a little ahead of myself there, Andy. But I'll throw it back to you for Lando Norris finishing in 12th. Double non-points finish for McLaren today.
3 little words that are just going to drives me crazy. Slow, speed, corners. That McLaren car had no drive in 2 critical sections. One they were okay going into these slow corners, but they could not come out of them to save their lives. Could not come out of the bus stop to save their lives, and they could not come out of that La Source hairpin. Every time they go into it, the Constantina was just working so far against them. I actually saw a stat that said Lando was actually one of the top people in the speed trap, which you'd think, in a track like this would be pretty good, and you'd think he'd be carving his way through the field, right? Well, no, simply because it was such a deficiency coming out of La Source. And if you don't get a good drive out of La Source, you don't go through Eau Rouge at the proper speed, you don't go into the Camel Straight, you can't complete that DRS pass, as powerful as the DRS was. So it comes down to, this has been the bugaboo with this car all year long. So whenever you see tracks with these hairpin type turns, they continue to struggle. They've been able to kind of get through it or through some other circuits or other parts of the lap, and they can still make lap time, which is the frustrating part. So you look at their qualifying pace and you say, that's not bad. You look at their practice pace, that wasn't bad. Yeah. But when it came down to in the race, in the heat of the battle, those slow speed corners were just killers.
Yeah, rough weekend or a rough day for McLaren. Good thing the only guy to win a race in the last decade for him is not going to be on the team anymore. I couldn't help myself. So there.
That's all right. That's all right. that has been. I've read that a few times. I expect to read it some more.
And then Lance Stroll, the second of the Aston Martin finishers in 11th place. I thought it was interesting to see him on screen a few different times. He was part of that group battling for the 1 point there in 10th place. The Aston Martin looked punchy. I guess that's the only way I can describe it today.
Well,
go ahead.
I would say on the Lance Stroll side, he was both him and Lando were the victims of being behind Alex Albon, who made his car extremely wide and did everything that a Williams driver would need to do to get a point. So good on him for doing that. Where the Aston Martins and maybe the McLarens were suffering in those slow speed corners, the Williams got the drive off and made that first sector. They were dominant in that first sector, even so much in qualifying, setting purple sectors.
Purples.
Yes, they were setting purple sectors by themselves without a toe. So it was just they were able to leverage that part of the lap and were able to keep positions because of it. And well done to Alex Albon and Williams. That's what you're trying to do there is punch above your weight. They did that today.
Yeah, the DRS trains were tough at certain parts of the day today, and especially when you're behind Albon, who had to have been the fastest in the straight line. He was really driving that Williams well, and he's a hell of a driver. As long as as long as Max isn't his teammate, he is a hell of a driver.
Well, and it came out his new deal. He is now out of the Red Bull affiliation. It's no longer a loan deal. He is on his own. He has been unfettered. And it would be interesting to see, if the Williams car can come a little bit better, that's a car that can punch above its weight. Yep. This is the guy that they're going to rally around, and they're going to try to build that team, their new team now, effectively, with Doralton coming in around Alex Albon. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he gets a new teammate besides Latifi. If it's a young Charger, whoever it may be, it'll be an interesting test for them to go up against Albon, who will now be fully comfortable in that seat and really ready to show some things. Because they get points multiple times in the Williams is always impressive.
Yep.
We got Sebastian Vettel. I thought had a hell of a day for an Aston Martin, finishing in 8th place. Anything on his day?
Took advantage of the grid penalty shuffle and all that, and the fact that Albon was behind and kind of used Albon as the pick basically to open up on lap time, and showed really well. I thought in sections the Aston Martin looked really good. It was just that little bit, Stroll, in all likelihood, should have gotten around Albon. It was, I think, Albon's mega defending that prevented that. Otherwise, I would say the Aston Martins looked pretty good around this track this weekend.
Yeah, speaking of looking good around the track, the Alpines. First up, we got Esteban Ocon in 7th and Alonso in 5th, who we kind of already touched on. But, Ocon just... I don't want to like him, but he does more and more things where I'm like, damn, that's pretty sweet. He's actually a pretty good driver. Today, passing multiple drivers at the same time, twice today. Both times, pretty impressive. He's got some skills. Still not sure I could totally be a fan of his. He just seems kind of not a dude I would root for, but hell of a driver. What do you think about his day?
You put him in a situation where you ask him to perform, and this season he's performed. You really can't complain. There's nothing. It's nothing flashy. It's not like Alonso that'll go out and stick it on P3 or P2 or anything like that. But he had the engine penalty. Starts in front of Lando, and he's 5 positions in front of him at the end of the day. And effectively, cars that are competing with each other for the same spot. So that was damn impressive. And those overtakes were damn impressive. So he always seems to show well here at Spa. I think the characteristics of this track, the characteristics of the Alpine car, and all the upgrades, I think, came together very nicely for them today. Well done.
Yeah, even a day like today when we were talking about Aston Martin looking pretty good, it's just hard to fathom why Alonso would leave Alpine looking as good as they did today and then go to Aston Martin, who looked pretty good today, but still didn't look that great, I think, overall. So
I would venture, and from what all was said over the course of the weekend, it was he didn't get along with Otmar. Otmar coming in, changed that relationship. Otmar did not come in and, air quote, kiss the ring like, the other Alpine staff had done, because it even came out. It was interesting in the media sessions on, I think it was Thursday or Friday. It came out that Alonso had told all of his mechanics, all the engineers, the Alpine board and CEO. The one guy he didn't tell, Otmar Safnar. That's some serious mega shade. And right, exactly. It's very telling as to what that relationship was or wasn't in the short time that Otmar's been there.
Yeah, I was going to make a joke about it. I'm sure it'll go great with Lawrence Stroll, but maybe it will. Because Lawrence Stroll and Otmar didn't really get along great. Maybe Alonso and Lawrence will be great. Maybe Alonso will become his adopted son, and Stroll will finally lose his seat.
I mean, what they're going to build around him, and Lawrence obviously did the right schmoozing at the right time, and however Fernando was feeling, it seemed the right place, right time, and that's why he did it. I don't know that the car's there yet, but again, as we talked about even in the preview, they've been getting good personnel from other places.
Yeah.
It just all hasn't cooked yet, and I think a lot of that was due to the late nature of Otmar leaving and the new people coming in. Next year, it's all reset. So if they can have a smooth year at the top, they could be on the come next year too.
Yeah, that's a good call out about how many good people are coming into the important positions. I'd have to imagine that's something Lawrence Stroll's pretty good at. You don't lead his companies as big as successful as he does without knowing how to put the right people in the right places. So definitely something interesting going into the next season. Talking about next season, that's what I'm looking forward to. Ferrari. That transition was the best part about what I'm going to say here.
Yeah. Now I hear you.
Man, it sucks, man.
I'll give you a comparison. This has got 2012 McLaren vibes all over this, because it's the parallels are kind of scary. Where here the Ferrari for a good chunk of the season was the fastest car, and they just couldn't get out of their way. And in 2012, the McLaren was for a good chunk of that season the fastest car, and they couldn't get out of their own way either with Hamilton or Jenson Button. So I feel the pain. I know what you're going through. I was thinking about that. It's like, it's always something different that always seems to pop up. And apparently we tried to go for a fast lap, and that didn't work out so well.
Yeah. I love sports, but like it can be a cruel mistress.
Yes.
Rough day, a new one now, the tear off getting in the brake duct, causing an early pit stop, and to clear that out. And so we were kind of, he looked pretty good to start, patient but aggressive, I thought. He didn't make up as many spots as quickly as Max was, but I thought he made up a few, but I was also smart about it. I think Charles a year or two ago maybe would have wrecked at turn 1 or turn 2, trying to do a little bit too much. So I thought I liked that. The pit stop kind of screwed him. I mean, he had an okay day. He had some good overtakes, and he looked pretty fast at times, but it just wasn't. I don't know. It just didn't feel good at all throughout the day. And then at the end, got the 5-second penalty for speed in the pit lane, which I guess one of the sensors was screwed up or something from that same tear off, getting caught in the air duct. For whatever reason, how those aligned, I don't know, but. That put him behind Alonso at the end, so just disappointing,
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Really, I haven't thought that Monza was going to be a good race for this year, but that's really, give me a good result there. Let me hang my hat on that. It's really all I can ask for the final eight races, I think. But yeah.
Well, I also read, I think, something that said that Ferrari, with the floor changes that were kind of required, they had to raise their floor more than what they were anticipating, especially here with the reprofiled Eau Rouge. And if you saw the Friday practices, there were multiple cars leaving plank marks in the asphalt there going through that corner. So a lot of cars, I think, and a lot of setups, FIA notwithstanding, had to make setup changes and compromises. And I know Ferrari was one. I know Mercedes was another, and because of that, maybe you didn't get to see them at their best today. But I would hang my hat on, what was it, P15 to P6? still decent. I mean, even let's take the going for the fastest lap call, which, you know, when your driver's not all number one for that idea and you're down 80 points, maybe that's not the best idea, and maybe that's not the best call. Maybe that extra point really isn't going to matter. Maybe coming home P5 feels better.
Fighting for every point, Andy.
I guess.
Silly. So what we got left? We got George Russell finishing in fourth, just outside the podium. Well, that's a pretty good pace at times during the day. Obviously finished well ahead of Lewis, the only Mercedes driver scoring points today. So keeping Mercedes in the hunt for number 2 as a constructor. What do you think about Georgie Boy's day?
His race was solid. Again, you know, at some point, at times, possibly even challenging Sainz for third or Checo Perez for position was good. The story of Mercedes this weekend was nowhere in qualifying pace. The normal hand-wringing of the Friday did not translate into it all getting fixed on Saturday, at least. 1.8 seconds, the delta between Verstappen and Hamilton on qualifying pace. Toto Wolff, I think, called it at the end of Saturday the worst qualifying that he'd experienced in 10 years. That just goes to show how good they've been, if that's the worst that you've ever done. I actually wouldn't mind 1.8 seconds slower than Max today, at least for my rooting interest. But that having all been said, George continues to do the job. He's very solid. Race pace was much better. They rallied and they got a good result. 12 points will matter in the fight. They are creeping up on Ferrari for P3 in the constructors.
Yes, they are. All right, so let's move up to the podium. Carlos Sainz in third, Sergio Checo Perez in second, a distant second to the winner today, Max Verstappen in first place, all alone, starting from 14th, finishing in first. We'll start off with Carlos Sainz, who started off in first, thanks to some grid penalties for Max Verstappen. Had a good start. Couldn't ask much more, but at the end of the day, the Red Bull is a lot faster than the Ferrari. So I think third was the best Carlos could have hoped for. Happy for another podium for Carlos. Would have preferred a win, of course, but I'll take that podium for him. Well, and then Red Bull. Or go ahead.
And for Sainz, he can finally say the curse of Spa has been broken. This is now 2 in a row. This was legitimately a podium on merit. I like the fact. We talk about Ferrari strategy and what they do wrong. I liked the fact that they started him on the soft tire, that they went aggressive, and they at least knew what they were up against, and they took their best shot at it. They weren't able to hold the lead for a period of time. It wasn't a long period of time. Once Max got up there after the first round, after that first stint, it was pretty much fait accompli. But I like the fact that Ferrari, for the most part, with Sainz, went aggressive, went racy, and saw what they could do.
Yeah. But Red Bull, the class.
Yes.
The 1-2. If I had to guess, we got 8 races yet. I would say more than 50% of them will finish in a 1-2 with Red Bull. I think they're just going to really stamp their dominance on this season the rest of the way. Sergio finished, 17, almost 18 seconds behind his teammate who started, 12 places behind him.
Yep. Yeah.
But, what more can you ask for from a teammate than to finish second, I guess,
And didn't do a second run in Q3 and had extra sets of tires left at the end of the race. It's all that. It was just, this is the closest that I've seen to 2014 Mercedes dominance, where they were just clear of everybody. And it didn't matter who else was the challenger. They were just gone. If this is a harbinger of things to come. Now, I hesitate to say that this track is going to be a harbinger of things to come, because there are some unique things about this particular track that don't necessarily translate to where we're going. But if they can replicate this type of form, look out. Could you imagine what this would have been if Max had been on the pole? He might have lapped all the way to P13 for all we know. as opposed to starting from P14. So, yikes. Dominant form. What else can you say? Good pit stops all the way around, well executed. No flaws in the Red Bull armor today.
Yeah, I mean, they look really, really good. And to have Max Verstappen as your number one driver, he's the number one driver on the grid right now. I don't think really anybody can touch him in the form he's in. And Checo is probably the best number two he's had. So looks pretty good for Red Bull. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, pay some bills here from some of our favorite sponsors, and we'll be right back to break down the standings for both drivers and constructors, get to some fan emails, and talk about predictions, which probably is the most points scored as a podcast in the history of the podcast. So make sure you hang around till we get to that.
Yes, some of you had really good days, and some of us did not. We'll find out in a few minutes. Come on back.
Welcome back to Season 4, Episode 33 of the Outlap F1 Podcast, part of the Ship It Studios Podcast Network. This is the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix race review. I am your host, James, along with my wonderful co-host, Andy. And we've talked about qualifying, we've talked about the race. Now we talk about the updated driver standings. And we still have Max Verstappen all alone in first. Increased his lead. He's now got 284 points. Followed by Sergio Perez, who's back in second place with 191 points. Charles Leclerc with 186, now down in third. Carlos Sainz just behind him with 171. George Russell right on Carlos Sainz with 170. Lewis Hamilton trails him with 146. Then we drop quite a bit down to Lando Norris in seventh with 76 points. Esteban Ocon with 64 in eighth. Fernando Alonso then with 51 in ninth place. And then Valtteri Bottas still in the top 10 with 46 points. Andy, break down the team standings for me, please.
Yes, and that is Red Bull, free and clear and in its own universe, basically. 475 points. Second place is Ferrari on 357. Third is Mercedes on 316. Fourth is Alpine on 115. They open up on McLaren, who are still at 95. Alfa Romeo is in P6 with 51. Haas scores in P7 with 34. AlphaTauri checks in P8 with 29. Aston Martin does score some points today, so they move up to 24 points. And Williams Mercedes with that P10 now up from 3 to 4 points.
It's a lot of points for Williams, so it's actually pretty good.
Considering where that team has been, this is a remarkable accomplishment. This is good. They are coming back.
Yes, sir. Before we get into the fan emails, quick mention of some news that did drop over the weekend officially. Had been rumored for a while, at least on the Audi side, but we will get Audi as a constructor here in a few seasons. And then, of course, they announced that 2023 Spa will be on the calendar for 2023. F1 themselves announced that. So we will talk about that on Wednesday for our preview episode where we typically break down some of the news. I just wanted to make sure you mentioned that just in case you had missed that. But I know they announced the Spa thing like on lap 4 or 5. And the Audi thing was a pretty big deal.
I'd like to take credit for this. We were one of the first ones to bring this out. I reported it on Friday because Craig Slater on, I think it was the F1 show, actually on his very last segment came in. He was under an umbrella and he's like, "We're going to do this again next year." Not sure if it ended up only being a 1-year extension. Apparently the talks with the South African circuit in Kyalami completely broke down. They needed to do a whole bunch of things to be ready for next year. That is not going to happen, apparently. And so Spa gets to stay on the calendar. So for all the hand-wringing that was going on about it, at least we get one more occasion to come back to Spa. And the fans came out. Shows me it's still very viable as an F1 venue. We'll talk about it some more when we get to awards and some other things, but I'm glad to see it.
I am very glad to see it. I love Spa. All right, let's get into the fan emails. For that, we start off, as we always do, with Rachel Fleming. She says, what should Mercedes do now? Do they still try and unlock the potential still in this year's car, or do they call it a bad job and now focus on the 2023 car? Also, since Max can win from 14th, 10th, and now probably from Mars, and that Red Bull looks bulletproof, will Max now win every race from now to Abu Dhabi, just like 2013? Also, Danny Rick is confirmed to be leaving McLaren, I presume, with his pockets full of cash, while most people, including myself, are expecting him to go back to Alpine. There are rumors that Haas are trying to convince him to join them. Could the USA link tempt Danny Rick to the States? All right, so first off, yes, Max can win from anywhere. I think you're probably right about that. I wouldn't be surprised if he won every race here and out. I'd like to think somebody else might pop up there for one or two, maybe even Checo, especially in Mexico, but we will see about that. And then, yes, Danny Rick is leaving. That Alpine thing will be interesting to see how the hearing goes. I think you mentioned it's coming up here pretty soon.
We're going to get some clarity on that, hopefully on Monday. We know that the case is going to get before. So the way that F1 contract disputes work, they don't actually go to a court. They go to the Contract Resolution Board, which is kind of a de facto court. It's made up of a bunch of FIA lawyers who will hear both Alpine's side and Oscar Piastri's side as to why Alpine thinks he's under contract and why Oscar thinks he's really not. So they're supposed to hear the case on Monday. Whether or not we get a ruling on Monday, I've heard some conflicting reports. They may decide to take it under advisement and think about it for a week or two, but we may get some super clarity on that. So the lot is going to kind of ride on – a lot of the silly season is going to ride on that, and so we'll see how that has to go. To Rachel's first question, do I think Max is going to win every race? He definitely can. If they are on this form, there is nothing to suggest that they can't. However, I do think randomness and random chance and some sort of a technical default somewhere will probably rear its ugly head. So I don't think he's going to necessarily be able to pull that off. I'm just thinking about, tracks like Singapore, Japan, even Coda, could be an engine killer. Singapore maybe not so much an engine killer, but just the hot temperatures make, reliability an issue for everybody. So we'll see how that goes. We talked about Danny Rick on our preview episode. Could Haas be potentially a tempter for him if the Alpine falls through for some reason? It's the next logical seat of what's open and available, and we don't know where the state of Haas and Mick Schumacher are right now. So it is true that Gene obviously has a NASCAR team and has the capability to stick Daniel Ricciardo in a NASCAR for a couple races. Danny's not wanting to do the ovals in IndyCar, would lead me to think that his prospects are not that great for doing a full-time NASCAR ride, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't loan him out for a road course or two. He knows how to get around Coda, so, NASCAR goes there, so we could definitely see that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'd love to see Danny Rick on Haas and in any other racing series, too. I just want to see him race as long as possible. We have Dave Doherty, our boy. He asks, what are your thoughts on Ferrari's race? Did they impress you? No, Dave. They did not impress me. They continue to disappoint and upset me. Hope you're not rubbing it in, buddy. Because I think he's a Mercedes fan himself. But I'd have to imagine they didn't impress you either, Andy.
Other than the good strategy calls I thought with Sainz, which I actually thought was the right thing to do. Like, if you're going to go down and be racy. I wish my own team would kind of learn that mindset a little bit every now and again. As to the Leclerc side, bad luck with that tear off, getting caught in the vent there. That's just going to happen. The only thing that didn't really impress me was the not listening to your driver when he's telling you, is this 1 point really worth it, guys? And them not listening to him. So, we've talked about Ferrari and Ferrari decision desk and all that other stuff. And Matthias seems to not want to compromise on that. And we just keep getting more sample size that says, well, maybe you should.
All right. The Formula One says, the formula says 1, Latifi is not fast. Agreed. 2, George impresses with consistency again. Hard to argue with that. I agree. Ferrari were less bad, but not great. Okay. Silver lining. Fine. 4, Hamilton owning a mistake is refreshing. I'd say it's refreshing to see Lewis make a mistake and not finish the race.
Just to make one.
It's nice that he owned up to it. I appreciate that about him. Any debate with any of those 4 points?
No, I agree with pretty much all 4 of them. Latifi should not be in that seat. Any thought that Williams is going to put him back in. I think you got a hard charger in one Logan Sargent, who I would love to see just what he could do with F1 machinery. He's had kind of a bad run of luck in the F2 series, but he's still got good qualifying for him. I mean, he put it on P3 here. So that, as an American, I would want to see an American on the grid. I would love to see Logan get the opportunity. George Russell, we've talked about it many times, just Mr. Consistency, doing the job, doing it well, getting the most out of a car that is not very compliant. So that's true. Ferrari, less bad. I'll agree with that. And as far as Lewis owning the mistake, I don't know that I wouldn't say it's refreshing. I always thought he's been relatively a stand-up guy. When it's not involving Max, I think that sometimes both Mercedes and Red Bull, when they look at each other, they're so much alike that it's oil and water and it just doesn't mix. But when it's other drivers, I think they have actual vision and they can see what's there to be seen.
Then we have Vika Sharma. That I really enjoyed this race, especially all the battles in the midfield. Aston Martin and Williams were the surprise package. Dominant Red Bulls with Max, as Checo put it, being on another planet. Some say he might be able to race from another planet and still win. Loved Alonso's rant on Hamilton. Leclerc, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for leaving it at that. I don't want to talk about it. I agree. The midfield battles with Aston Martin and Williams were surprising and awesome to watch. Everybody except for Latifi. And then, we talked about Red Bull's dominance. Couldn't agree more there. And I also loved Alonso's rant on Hamilton. I like this Vikas guy. He didn't really beat me up about Leclerc, so I appreciate this comment.
No, it's fair points all the way around. I tend to agree. Aston Martin taking advantage of, like I said, the pick that Alex Albon was doing to keep maybe some quicker cars behind. Allowed them to score and score well. And Seb made the most of the mixed-up grid, and that's what an experienced driver can do for you.
All right, then we have
Georgiatopoulos Mike.
Georgiatopoulos Mike. I really don't understand Ferrari anymore. Why race when every strategy decision is wrong? Every time I see them drop the ball, I am reminded of Seb's quote about everybody being a fan. I own several Ferrari merch. Thanks, Shell. I just want to see them win a race without mistakes. They are letting down their fans and rivals alike. Even Williams managed to finish P10. Sorry for the long messages. I am just flabbergasted. Why Ferrari? Why? Verstappen did an excellent job securing a second World Drivers' Championship with a remarkable performance. Can someone teach Latifi how to drive? It sucks watching Ferrari as a fan right now. I'm going to agree with you on that. I don't know what else to add to it, but it does look like Verstappen secured his second World Drivers' Championship. So,
I would say that's pretty much done with Verstappen. I mean, there would have to be some sort of mega glitch that has not come out of anywhere that would have to show itself within the next 2 or 3 races for this to even start to talk about this being competitive again. He's got almost a 100-point lead on a legit rival, and we know Checo's not really a legit rival at this point. So 98 points means that's 5 races that he could not score, and Leclerc would win, and it still might not matter. So, that's a lot. The math doesn't look well if you're a Ferrari fan. Yes, can someone teach Latifi how to drive? We just said it. I think he should be out of that car at the end of the year. I think that's what Williams will do. I think they're just being respectful about it and waiting for that contract to end itself, and then they'll risk him well, and that'll be the end of that. And Max, utterly dominant. Completely agree with that as well.
That means we can move into our weekly awards. And for that, we start off with our rubbish award. Deanna did send hers in. So I'll start off with hers, and she says the Ferrari strategy team. I am not surprised. They have resorted to just asking their driver what they want to, so I guess they can divert the blame later. That's a very, very good point. Why would you broadcast that much information to all the other teams? This has to be the weakest link at Ferrari right now, and they've lost so much confidence in themselves. They've almost stopped making decisions entirely. I think she summed it up perfectly. Thank you, Deanna. I just put for my rubbish being a Ferrari fan because it makes me feel like rubbish. Andy, what do you got?
So we talked about this in our quick little news segment. Spa, nice, it's back on the calendar, but that's it. 360,000 people through the turnstiles apparently isn't enough. This venue needs to be secured for the long term. I think Liberty overall have done a really good job with this. I don't necessarily understand the underlying issues that are the holdup here. I don't know what Spa is doing or not trying to do that other venues are willing to do. If it's just a matter of luxury boxes, then that's horribly unfortunate if that's what it's going to come down to. I tried to try to figure out what some of these underlying issues were. I couldn't find a whole lot. So my hope is that next year at this time, we're not bidding Spa a fond farewell from the calendar, but yet we're securing a long-term deal because that's the right answer. And then, that will then get all of these people off of Liberty's backs that say that they don't want to secure or keep the real DNA of Formula One. Because I think they do. I just don't know that they have they might not just know how to do it yet. But secure this race. It needs to be secured. Just do it and be done.
I agree there. Analysis paralysis. I have a feeling I know which direction this is going to go. Let's see if you can surprise me here. Andy, you're going first.
Well, I will give it to Ferrari. I have a runner-up, by the way, that isn't Ferrari. The fastest
I want to hear them both.
Okay. The fastest lap call I actually thought was technically correct, but the execution shows why you might not want to do that when you're 90-plus points down in the driver's standings. Was that 1 point really worth it? Obviously, as was shown, it did not come to fruition. My runner-up for this is actually, I'm going to do it to my own team again, Lando's side of the garage. Now, this goes back to Saturday. Lando did not do a second Q3 run. He did one Q3 run on used soft tires, and then at the very end, and I mean the very end, right at when they were supposed to come out of the garage, Lando makes the call to say, let's keep this set of new tires. Let's see what we can do with it tomorrow. Okay, fine. Got it. Understood. Guess what tire McLaren didn't run at all today? The unused set of soft tires. Why do one when it had nothing to do with the other? I mean, it like, to me, it would have been better. Go down, be racy, put that soft tire on in the first stint, see how high you can get, and then throw the set of mediums on, then throw the set of hards on, and let's see what happens with it. But instead, they ran medium, hard, medium, and at the end of the race, there was no inherent pace. We talked about why. But you got to understand as a team, when you're down on a little bit of pace, you have a part of the track that's a bugaboo, you got to do something strategy-wise, try to make up for it. And they just didn't want to do it. They just followed the same strategy everybody else did. And no points because of it. So there you go.
All right. Good answer. I appreciated the runner-up there. Deanna says Ferrari. And I'm just going with the namesake of this award, which is Ferrari. And I don't think I can sum it up any better than you did at the first half of your answer, so we'll leave it at that. All right, dark horse of the day. Looks like me and Deanna are aligned here. She says Ocon for the 2 double overtakes in one race. I agree. I've got Esteban up there as well as my dark horse of the day. Andy, who are you going with?
I'm giving it to both Alonso and Esteban Ocon. For Alonso, converted the strong P3 grid spot into a solid finish, got the car home. In spite of that contact, we saw part of the wheel cover was flopping around, but it never came off, never became dangerous. So good job on Alonso to not hit a curb or cause it to come any more looser than it was. So that's good execution by him there. And Esteban Ocon, the 2 overtakes with multiple cars. When you do it more than once, when you do it once, it's impressive. When you do it twice, that's really impressive. So Alpine as a whole, dark horse of the day.
Hell yeah. All right, let's move on to driver of the day. I'm going with Max. As I already said, this is just completely dominant day for Max. Starting as far back as he did and just still being the odds-on favorite, knowing that you're the favorite, and then being able to go out there and perform. He just shows that he's on another level right now. And more or less solidified his second Drivers' Championship, and I expect many more wins still to come this season and many more wins to come in his career. Him and Red Bull go together like peanut butter and jelly right now, and they look like a dominant force for years to come. Deanna says, Max, that was unreal. And Andy, who do you got?
Max Verstappen, driver of the day. Easy pick here on a complete other level. Like I've said before, this was a reminiscent of 2014 Merc dominance as a team, and specifically just his side of the garage, leaving things on the table and not even having to, like I said, not having to do a second Q3 lap. Didn't matter. Was still good enough for pole. When you're that good, sit down, shut up, and take it the rest of the field, because he's just that damn good this time. So I will tip my cap, sir, and we'll see you in Zandvoort.
Yep. So for predictions, what a wild week. Andy in last place with only 2 points, which is normally like middle of the road. But you had P1 podium and P18 bonus pick, but that was it. When you consider me and Deanna tied for second with 5 points apiece, which would normally run away with the damn thing. I had P1 podium, P3 podium, fastest driver, fastest race lap, and the P18 bonus pick. Deanna had 5 points coming from a P1 and P3 podium as well, the P18 bonus pick, and the prop bet. However, John runs away with it with 7 points. I don't know if we've had that many before. It hasn't been very often.
John is channeling his inner Max Verstappen today.
Yeah. His answer's a little bit late, but I'm not saying that. We'll see. Get him in enough time, and then this will be a legitimate championship. Until then, I'd say it's in question. But he had the qualifying fast driver, the qualifying time, the P1 podium, P2 podium, P3 podium. He swept the podium, folks. Also with the fastest driver, P18 bonus pick, which I think we all got the P18 bonus pick. So that's pretty cool. It's
for once, well, the Curse of the Outlap F1 podcast only comes down on Nicholas Latifi. So let's look at it that way. Normally, when we all pick something, it never happens. This is something we picked that didn't happen.
Nicholas Latifi, the curse breaker. I believe it. So that puts our season standings for our predictions against us hosts. John now leading the way with 37. Deanna right behind him with 35. Andy not too far back with 32. And I'm within striking distance of Andy. I got 29. So just 3.
I told you all you had to do was get one of these podium calls right, and you were going to be right back at it. And there you go. Well, congratulations. You've done that.
I would not be surprised if I don't say Max Verstappen for my P1 finish for the rest of the season. And Checo will probably always be number 2. The only exception might be for Mexico, but we'll see when we get there. So any final thoughts, Andy, as we close out race 1 of our Welcome Back to F1 triple header?
Yeah, if you were happy with the result, congratulations. You hopefully get to see more dominance in a few days. If you're unhappy with today's result, hey, you got another race right behind you where things could change. I do expect there to be a massive difference between, at least in the midfield, who was good here versus who's going to be good in Zandvoort. They are very different tracks. They could not be more different as to what suits one car versus another. So if you were out of it this weekend, hope always springs eternal, and it's only as good as your next showing. And then we go from there to Monza, the king of speed track, where anything, as we've seen in the last couple of years, can happen. So, maybe the Drivers' Championship looks out of reach, but there's still battles going to be throughout. We will be here to cover it all, and we'll bring it all to you. It's going to be a Bellevue of news, I think, that's going to come out in the next week or two. Once we get the Piastri domino falling wherever that's going to go, that's going to kick off a whole bunch of silly season stuff that's going to all get resolved. So we'll be here for it.
Yeah, hopefully we get to talk about the Piastri news. We'll talk about some of the Audi stuff and some 2023 calendar stuff for sure on Wednesday when we record our preview episode, just a few days away. These next 3 weeks are going to fly by, Andy. So I'm excited to share in that with you, sir.
Yep.
But I think we are ready for you to close us out as you do so well.
Yep. As always, folks, may all your laps be fast.